Hello, and welcome to the Birdwatching channel. I'm Sharon Sorensen, your host, here to talk about Blackbird Bullies. They're the birds you love to hate. They usually arrive in noisy, voracious flocks, scaring off your favorite yard birds. And indeed, these black-colored birds can literally take over the yard. But these birds we call blackbirds aren't all true blackbirds. They're more accurately called black-colored birds, and there are four. We'll start first with European starlings because probably they're the most common black-colored birds that hoard your feeders. As the name suggests, European starlings don't belong here. The 200 million starlings now in North America descended from only about 100 birds that were introduced from England into New York's Central Park in the early 1890s. And 30 years later, they reached Florida. And in another 25 years, they hit California. And after that, by 1975, they had blanketed all of North America, reaching the last outpost of Alaska. So they're prolific, these European starlings. In summer, they're mostly black. Their sharply pointed bill bright yellow. And in the right light, they're iridescent. But they're not bullies at the feeders in the summer. They're paired off, nesting, tending babies, foraging in small family groups. But oh my, the trouble starts in winter, when European starlings change, both in their appearance and in their behavior. Their wintertime plumage earns them the nickname rice bird for their rice-colored speckles. And their behavior changes because instead of gathering in small family groups, they join thousands of their fellows to forage harvested agricultural fields in search of spilled grain. Okay, so European starlings may be the most common black-colored bird hoarding your feeders, but the largest, noisiest, and pushiest of the black-colored birds are the common grackles. Their pale eyes are distinct, perhaps because they're otherwise really dark all over with no markings anywhere. But in good light, they do flash an iridescent sheen, showing a bronzy body, lavender wings, and a bluish head. Females are only slightly less glossy than males. Otherwise, the sexes look alike. And unlike other black-colored birds, they have a long, rounded, keel-shaped tail. So that takes us now to the third of the four black-colored birds, the only one that is truly a blackbird. This noticeably smaller bird is a red-winged blackbird. Mature males are black all over except for one outstanding feature. They wear that signature red wing, the bright red feather patches on their shoulders. And the brighter and bigger the red patch, the higher up in the pecking order the male is among his fellows. So in the yard, when birds want to feed in peace, mature redwings may hide their shoulder feathers to avoid any sign of aggression when another shows his aggression. So I guess it's called peace at the dinner table. Immature red-winged blackbird males, however, lack the red patches, or, depending on age, maybe they're just not yet very red or very large. The first-year birds are streaky, so much so that early on they could be mistaken for a different species. And female red-winged blackbirds? Well, they have a rather unusual distinction for being the most misidentified bird in the U.S. because they look more like sparrows than blackbirds. Smaller than males, she's camouflaged. Because she weaves her nest among cattail stalks, she's patterned to blend among them. Okay, that's three of the four black-colored bullies: starlings, grackles, and redwings. And all three species tend to form large wintering flocks. So here's the fourth black-colored bird, ironically called brown-headed cowbirds, the smallest of the black-colored birds, but they can make up for their small size in numbers. Male cowbirds are dark all over, but in the right light, their namesake brown head shows clearly. female brown-headed cowbirds, however, are plain, and overall unremarkable gray. And among all the black-colored birds and their mates, she is the smallest, least obvious, and least aggressive. But some of us still find her distasteful. Historically, cowbirds followed bison herds across the prairie, so they couldn't hang around and nest. So they laid their eggs in other birds' nests, a behavior we call parasitizing. But with the demise of bison, cowbirds adopted to our herds of cattle, and of course, as a result, they no longer roam, but they still parasitize. And when cowbirds parasitize, their nestlings hatch early and cause host nestlings to die. Seeing a chipping sparrow, for instance, stretching to feed a larger-than-self cowbird fledgling, well, it's pretty disgusting. Okay, that's it. Native or not, reputable or not, those are the 4 so-called blackbirds that tend to flock to backyard feeders, scaring off the little guys. In winter, their abundance often puts feeder hosts on edge, and there's good reason. You see, in winter, the black-colored birds are no longer hanging out in small family groups. Rather, they've all formed wintertime foraging flocks. All 4 species often join together in winter, so pretty soon we're talking some monster flocks, sometimes numbering in the hundreds of thousands or, even in the millions. At dusk and dawn, we sometimes see long ribbons of blackbirds undulating across the sky, stretching horizon to horizon as they move from fields to roosts and back to fields. Then ice hits, or snow hits. The fields are covered, food supplies are buried, the birds are starving, and bingo, in small groups, they find backyard feeders. And that's when folks ask, what can I do to get rid of these blackbirds? They're scaring off all my little birds, and furthermore, they're eating me out of house and home. Well, let's begin with this understanding. When we put out feeders and feed, we don't get to decide what feeds. When food supplies are ice or snow covered or otherwise limited, birds are starving. All birds, even the black-colored bully birds. So learning to understand the birds for who and what they are is a start to dealing with their presence. And the good news is that there are things you can do to make life better for the little birds that may skitter away when the big guys arrive. To begin, remember this: you get what you feed. Just as restaurants attract clients by what they offer on their menus, so it is with birds at your buffet. If you offer blackbirds their favorite foods, expect them to eat ravenously and return often. But if you avoid their favorites, they won't be quite so interested. So avoid their 2 big favorites. First, avoid cracked corn. Cracked corn is part of many seed mixes, sometimes a major part because it's cheap and helps the manufacturer make money. And it's typically part of soot cakes for the same reason. So read the labels and make your choice. Second, avoid Milo and anything including Milo. Again, many seed mixes include this grain. Again, read the labels. The idea here is to offer bird feed that the black-colored birds don't like. Thus, instead of seed mixes with the cracked corn and the Milo that the bullies love, switch to safflower seed. They're not fond of that, but all the little songbirds eat it. Ditto with thistle seed, sometimes marketed as Niger seed. And then switch to pure soot, eliminating all those other soot cake ingredients that the bullies love. Okay, so we've got that we have to pay attention to what we feed and read the labels. Next, pay attention to where and how you feed. Numerous authorities recommend, first, keeping feed off the ground. All 4 black-colored bird species prefer to forage on the ground. Second, forget the platform feeders. They provide open feeding for everything, regardless of size. Third, consider alternate feeders. 4 in particular: weighted hopper feeders, designed so that heavy black birds close the feed supply; tube feeders with sharp perches that prevent larger birds from perching; mesh-like cages around tube feeders that keep out large birds; and upside-down soot feeders that work well for woodpeckers, but not so much for black-colored birds like starlings. Finally, 2 personal suggestions. Offer readily available seed, all their favorites, scattered on the ground, favorite location, but at a remote place, well away from your feeders. That draws the crowds of black-colored birds away from where the little birds feed. Second, since the black-colored birds prefer to avoid closed-in areas, I scatter seed, you guessed it, in closed-in areas, like among the winter-dead perennials, underground brushing shrubs, and other densely vegetated spaces. The little guys love foraging in such protected areas, but those black-colored birds, well, not so much. Now know that the birds you love to hate will inevitably show up when snow covers their natural food supply. Nothing is 100%. If they're starving, they'll eat almost anything they can get their beaks around. But while these suggestions may not offer a 100% effective deterrent, combined they will surely slow the bullies. Indeed, you can cut your bird feed losses and reduce stress among your little birds and you by giving some of these suggestions a try. So thank you for joining me for Blackbird Bullies. And if you'd like to know more about birds, you might consider my books, Birds in the Yard Month by Month, How Birds Behave, and Planting Native to Attract Birds to Your Yard. Check out my website, birdsintheyard.com, or join me on Facebook, where I post something almost every day about birds and bird habitat. Meanwhile, I hope you can deal with the blackbird bullies, and I hope you always have wonderful birds in your binoculars.